Darius Banks was 38 years old, and until that Tuesday afternoon, he believed his wife was protecting her sick brother. Every month for nearly 3 years, $10,000 left their joint account. Money Darius earned running Banks Electric, money he wired conduit, and pulled cable, and built a business from nothing to make. Andrea had cried in his arms, telling him about Andre's kidney disease. Stage 3. Progressing. Too proud to ask for help directly. And Darius, because that is the kind of man he is, had held her, and told her they would handle it together, and never once questioned her tears. Then a private investigator called him on a Tuesday afternoon and told him his wife was at a restaurant. Their restaurant, the one where he proposed. Darius drove there. He stood at the window, and the man sitting with his hand on Andrea's lower back, watching her face while he kissed her palm, that man was not sick. That man was not her brother. That man had been living in a luxury apartment for nearly 3 years on $10,000 a month that Andrea withdrew like a bill on the first of every month, with Darius's money and Darius's trust, and a lie she had rehearsed until it felt like the truth. Darius took one photograph through that window. Then he walked back to his truck. He did not go inside. He did not call her name. What he did next would cost Andrea everything she thought she had secured. But standing in that parking lot, phone in hand, he hadn't moved yet. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The boots went on left foot first. Always. It wasn't superstition. It was just the way Darius Banks did things. In order, with intention, one step at a time. He laced them up in the dark kitchen at 5:47 a.m. The house quiet around him, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a garbage truck working its way up the block. He didn't need the lights. He knew every inch of this kitchen. He had rewired it himself. That was the thing about this house. There wasn't a single corner of it he hadn't touched. He'd bought it 11 years ago, 3 years before he ever met Andrea. Paid cash, $214,000, after 15 years of saving, of taking every job, of sleeping in a one-room apartment above a laundromat, and telling himself the noise of the dryers was just ambition with a motor. The craftsman sat on a wide lot in a solid neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, an oak tree in the front yard, so old it had probably watched the neighborhood change 3 or 4 times over. He had stood on the sidewalk the day he signed the papers and looked at it the way his mother used to look at houses like this from the bus window, like they were a different country. Then he went inside and started making it his. Paulette Banks had cried when he handed her a key. She hadn't explained why, and he hadn't asked her to. He already knew. He stood now at the kitchen counter with his coffee, still warm, and listened to the house settle around him in the particular way old houses do before the world wakes up. Small creaks, small shifts, the language of a structure that had learned to trust its own foundation. Through the doorway, the hallway light was off. Andrea's side of the bedroom door was still closed. He could picture exactly what was on the bathroom shelf without looking. 4 bottles of a lotion that cost more than his first set of socket wrenches, a perfume she'd asked for at Christmas, a silk bonnet on the hook by the mirror. The details of a woman who curated herself carefully and expected the world to take notice. He had noticed. He still did. That wasn't the problem. The problem was harder to name than that. It had come on gradually, the way a circuit degrades, not all at once, not with a clear moment of failure, but through a slow accumulation of small signs that something wasn't carrying the load it used to. Cheek kisses instead of real ones. Dinners where she was physically present but her eyes were somewhere else, tracking something he couldn't see. Conversations about her work events that lit her up in a way their conversations hadn't in a while. The way she reached for her phone the moment she thought he was asleep. He had been filing these things for months, not obsessively, Just the way he filed everything. Quietly, in order, without drawing conclusions before the evidence was complete. He was an electrician by trade and by nature. You didn't touch a live wire until you understood the full system. You traced every line back to its source first. Banks Electric had 6 employees now, not counting himself. He had started it alone at 23 with a second-hand van, a good reputation, and the understanding that quality was the only advertisement that didn't eventually cost you. 15 years later, the van had become a fleet of 4. The one-man operation had a commercial license, a payroll, and, as of 6 weeks ago, a preliminary agreement with a construction management firm to bid on the electrical systems contract for a new regional hospital going up on the east side of the city. The hospital contract was the largest opportunity he had ever touched. 7 figures, phased over 18 months. The kind of work that moved a company from solid to established in ways that couldn't be undone. He had spent 6 weeks preparing the bid documentation. His project manager said it was the cleanest package she'd ever seen come out of a shop this size. He finished his coffee. He rinsed the cup. He picked up his phone from the counter to check the weather before the drive in. The banking app was still open from the night before. He hadn't meant to look at it. His thumb moved out of habit, the same way he checked the weather, checked his messages, checked the things a man checks at the start of a day. The joint savings balance loaded on the screen. He went still. He read the number twice. Then he scrolled back to last month's statement and read that number. Then he set the phone face down on the counter and stood there with both hands flat on the granite, looking at the window above the sink, where the sky outside was just beginning to go from black to the particular blue-gray that came before the sun. $38,000. Gone. In a single month. He did not call Andrea's name down the hallway. He did not go back to the bedroom. He picked up his keys, picked up his phone, and walked out the side door to his truck. He sat in the Banks Electric lot with the engine off. The sky was fully light now, pale and flat, the kind of October morning that hadn't decided yet whether it was going to be cold. Around him, the lot was empty. His crew wouldn't arrive for another 40 minutes. The building behind him had his name on it in clean block letters above the door, same as the trucks, same as the hard hats hanging on the row of pegs inside. He looked at the balance on his phone again. He didn't move for a long time. The statements were spread across the kitchen table in 3 neat rows. Darius had printed them at the office before the crew arrived. 90 days of transactions, laid out in order, oldest to newest, the way he arranged a wiring diagram before he started tracing. He sat in the same chair he always sat in at dinner, the one facing the window, with a yellow legal pad beside the papers and a pen he hadn't touched yet. He didn't need the pen. The pattern was already obvious. Every first of the month, without variation, $10,000 moved out of the joint account and into an external account. The receiving account name read V. Price. The memo line, where there was one, said nothing useful, just a string of numbers. But the transfer name was clear, and so was the timing, and so was the amount. Clean, deliberate, the kind of transfer a person sets up once and then doesn't think about again because it runs itself. He opened Andrea's contacts on his phone. She had never given him a reason to look, so he never had. But she had also never changed the passcode from the one he'd watched her set 2 years ago. He found it in the A's. Dre saved with a small red heart beside the name. He sat with that for a moment. Then he set the phone down carefully, the way he set down tools he hadn't finished using. He had heard about Andre for years. Not often. Andrea wasn't someone who talked about her family more than necessary, but enough. Younger brother. The one who had always been a little scattered, a little resistant to settling down. Andrea had mentioned him in the light, dismissive way people mention siblings they feel superior to, which was its own kind of information. But She had also mentioned him in passing at enough Sunday dinners, enough holiday phone calls, that the name was embedded in the background of their marriage the way certain furniture becomes part of a room. You stop seeing it. It's just there. He had never met Andre in person. Not once. In 8 years. Andrea had always had a reason. Andre didn't really do the family thing. Andre was going through something. Andre wasn't up for socializing right now. Darius had accepted all of it without pressing. That was, he understood now, the design. He stacked the statements back into order, clipped them, and put them in the folder he had brought from the office. He poured himself a glass of water. He sat back down. He was still sitting there, the kitchen quiet and the folder closed in front of him, when he heard Andrea's car pull into the driveway at 9:14 p.m. She came in carrying her work bag and the specific, practiced ease of a woman who had learned to move through the house like nothing was ever wrong. "Hey, you," she said. She set her bag on the counter and reached over to squeeze his shoulder. She smelled like restaurant air, wine and warm bread, and her dress was the dark green one, the good one, the one she wore when appearances mattered. "Hey." He looked up at her. "Good dinner?" "Long." She opened the refrigerator, scanning it without reaching for anything. "The client talked for 3 hours. I smiled the entire time." She closed the refrigerator. "You eat?" "I did." She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, shoulders dropping the way they did when the performance of a day was finally allowed to come down. She looked tired. She looked beautiful. She looked like his wife. Darius kept his voice easy. "I was looking at the joint account today. The balance looked off. I wanted to make sure I hadn't missed a payment or something." Andrea's hand moved slightly on the glass, just slightly. Then it stopped. "I meant to talk to you about that," she said. Her voice was even. But she set the glass down and moved to the table, came and sat across from him, not beside him, the way people sit when they are about to have a conversation they have already rehearsed. She folded her hands. She looked at him with eyes that were already beginning to go soft around the edges, building toward something. "It's Andre," she said. Darius said nothing. He waited. She told him that Andre had been sick for almost 2 years. Kidney disease, stage 3, progressing slowly but consistently. The kind that wore a person down before it took them all the way. She said he was too proud to ask anyone for help, that he had refused charity his whole life, and this was no different. And so she had started quietly covering what insurance wouldn't: the specialist visits, the medications, the treatments that cost more than they should, and happened more often than anyone wanted. She said she had been managing it alone because she knew Darius would want to do more, would insist on it, and she hadn't wanted it to become a weight on the business. She said she was trying to protect him. She cried while she said it. Not dramatically, not the kind of crying that performed itself. The quiet kind, with still hands and a voice that thickened in the right places, and eyes that held his with the steady look of a woman sharing a burden she had been carrying alone for a long time. It was, Darius would think later, a very good performance. He stood up from his chair and came around the table and put his arms around her. He held her. She pressed her face against his shoulder, and he felt her breathe out, long and slow, like a woman who had finally been allowed to set something heavy down. His chin rested on top of her head. His face, above her, was completely still. Not angry, not sad. Just quiet in the way a room is quiet right after the power goes out. Right before you start figuring out where the problem is. He did not believe a single word she had said. He wrote the address down by hand. He could have photographed the statement, could have forwarded it to himself, could have done any number of things that were faster. But there was something about writing it down in his own handwriting, pulling the numbers off the page and putting them somewhere they were his. That felt right. Deliberate. The way he started every job. one careful step before the next one. He tore the sheet from the legal pad, folded it once, and put it in the breast pocket of his work shirt. Then he gathered the statements back into the folder, put the folder in his truck, and went to work. The day was a long one. A commercial rewire on the east side, a crew that was one man short, and a city inspector who showed up 2 hours early and found 3 things to write down before Darius walked him through the job properly and watched him cross 2 of them back out. That was the work. You did it right. You documented it right. And when someone showed up looking for problems, the truth was already there ahead of them. He got back in his truck at 4:47. He unfolded the paper from his breast pocket and typed the address into his phone. 17 minutes away. He drove there without deciding to, which is to say, he had already decided. The building sat at the corner of a broad, clean street, in a part of town where the sidewalks were pressure washed and the trees were the kind someone planted on purpose. It was a newer building, glass and pale stone, the kind of architecture that was more concerned with looking expensive than being beautiful. There was a valet stand out front, with a young man in a black vest standing beside it with his hands clasped. There was a canopy over the entrance. Through the lobby windows, Darius could see a concierge desk with a flower arrangement on top of it that was probably replaced every week. He parked across the street in the shadow of a parking structure and turned the engine off. He looked at the building for a while. Stage 3 kidney disease, specialist visits, medications, treatments insurance wouldn't cover. A man too proud to ask for help. He looked at the valet stand. He looked at the rooftop terrace visible above the building's upper edge. String lights, already on in the early evening. A few shapes moving around up there with glasses in their hands. This was not the address of a sick man. This was not the address of a man rationing anything. This was the address of a man who was doing fine, who was doing better than fine, who was doing very well by someone else's measure and someone else's money. Darius sat there for 11 minutes. He did not take any photographs. He did not get out of the truck. He just looked at the building the way he looked at a wiring diagram when something didn't add up. Quietly, patiently, waiting for the wrong thing to show itself. Then he picked up his phone and called Reggie. Reggie picked up on the second ring. "What's up?" "I need professional eyes on something," Darius said. "No drama." A pause. Short, but real. Reggie knew the difference between Darius calling about business and Darius calling about something else, and he knew which one this was. "What kind of professional?" "The kind that watches and writes it down." Another pause. Then, "I know somebody. She's good. She's quiet. That's what I need. I'll text you her information tonight. Appreciate it. D." Reggie's voice shifted slightly, still steady, but closer. "You good?" "I'm working on it," Darius said. He hung up. He looked at the building one more time. Then he started the truck and pulled out of the parking structure's shadow and headed home. Diane's contact information came through at 8:22 that evening. A name, a number, and a 3-word text from Reggie that said, "She's the real thing." Darius saved the number and set his phone face down on the nightstand. He would call her in the morning from the office, where he could speak plainly. He went to the kitchen and made dinner. Chicken, rice, something green. Simple food, the kind he had learned to cook for himself, long before he had a wife to cook it beside. He set 2 plates. Andrea came home at 6:55, changed out of her work clothes, and sat across from him at the table where, the night before, she had told him a story about her dying brother with still hands and wet eyes. She mentioned Andre about halfway through the meal, the way she did sometimes, casually, worked into the conversation the way you work in something familiar, something that has always been there. She said he had a hard day. Labs came back with numbers that had her worried. She said it without looking up from her plate, the way people mention something that has become part of the permanent furniture of their lives. Darius looked at her. "I'm sorry to hear it," he said. He meant neither word. The diner was called Mabel's. It sat 3 blocks from the East Side job site, sandwiched between a tire shop and a dry cleaner, and it smelled like coffee that had been warming since early morning, and eggs that had been ordered 10,000 times. Darius got there at 11:40 and took a booth near the back window. He ordered coffee and a water, and set his hands flat on the table. Diane arrived at 11:52. She was a compact woman in her mid-40s, with close-cut natural hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She wore a plain gray jacket and carried a canvas tote bag that looked like it belonged to someone's school teacher. She did not look like someone who spent her days watching people. That was probably the point. She slid into the booth across from him, set the tote bag on the seat beside her, and pulled out a manila folder that was thick enough to require a rubber band around it. "Victor Emmanuel Price," she said, 41 years old, currently residing at the Alderton Tower, which is the building you drove past. She set the folder on the table and slid it toward him. "Go ahead." Darius pulled the rubber band off and opened it. The first page was a summary sheet. Clean, organized, the kind of document a person produced when they knew their work might end up in front of a lawyer. Below the summary were the photographs, the building, the valet stand, a man in a cream-colored linen shirt coming through the lobby doors, tall, easy in his posture, the way men are easy when they have never had to carry anything. "No verifiable income for 4 years, Diane said. She kept her voice low and even. "No employer of record, no filed business entity, no tax filings consistent with self-employment. He describes himself on social media as an entrepreneur, but there is no business, there is no product, no client list, no contract history I could locate." She tapped the page. "His lease at the Alderton is paid monthly by wire transfer. The transfer amount matches the lease exactly." Darius turned to the financial pages. "I cross-referenced the transfer account with the lease payments and traced the pattern back 31 months, Diane said. "The transfers are consistent. First of the month, same amount, same account. The account is registered to an individual, not a business. The name on the account is Andrea L. Banks." The coffee arrived. Darius did not touch it. He kept turning pages. There was a section on Victor's prior history. 2 women, documented, both from the period before Atlanta. Both had funded his living expenses over extended periods. One had gone to authorities. There were no criminal charges, but the financial pattern was outlined clearly. Same method, same timeline, same slow escalation. There was a medical records section. Or rather, there was a section where medical records would have been, followed by a single line. No records located consistent with chronic kidney disease, stage 3 or otherwise, at any regional treatment facility, specialist practice, or hospital system within a 90-mile radius. Not sick, not a patient, not a brother. "He has no connection to Andre Watkins," Diane said. "Not family, not personal, not professional. The name on the lease is his own. The life in that apartment is his own." She paused. "And it is a very comfortable life, Mr. Banks." Darius closed the folder. He set his hands flat on the table again and breathed through his nose once, slowly. The diner moved around them, a waitress refilling someone's cup, the bell above the door, a man 2 booths over reading a folded newspaper. "You did good work," Darius said. "I did thorough work," Diane said. "There's a difference." She picked up her coffee. "I'll keep the case open unless you tell me to close it." "Keep it open." She nodded. They sat quietly for a moment. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it. Her expression didn't change much, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "They're at Provisions," she said. "Downtown. My associate just confirmed." Darius knew Provisions. He had taken Andrea there for their 5th anniversary. The lamb chops, the low lighting, the way she had looked across the table at him and said she was happy. He left 220s on the table and walked out. He found street parking half a block from the restaurant. He did not rush. He walked to the window at an angle, hands in his jacket pockets, and looked in the way a man might look at a menu posted by the door. They were at a corner table. Victor's chair was not across from Andrea's. It was beside her, pulled close, angled in. The seating of a man who had decided that across the table was too far. His hand rested on the low curve of her back, with the kind of ease that is not attraction, but habit. The settled, thoughtless touch of a man who has been touching her this way for a long time. Andrea leaned into him, not toward, into. There was weight in it, comfort, the kind of lean that happens without thinking. She laughed at something. Then she reached up and touched his jaw with her fingertips. Light, easy. A gesture so private and so practiced that Darius felt the bottom drop out of something inside him. Victor turned his face toward her hand. He took her wrist gently and lifted her hand to his mouth and kissed her palm, slowly, watching her face while he did it. Andrea closed her eyes for just a moment. Darius raised his phone and took 4 photographs, unhurried, clear. Then he turned around and walked back to his truck. He sat behind the wheel for a moment. Then he scrolled to the number his attorney had given him 18 months ago. Hargrove, the man who had handled the Banks Electric Incorporation, who had said, "Call me when it's something real." Hargrove picked up on the 3rd ring. "Darius, I need to know everything I'm entitled to," Darius said. "Everything. I'll bring the documentation." A pause. "How much documentation are we talking about?" "A full file, surveillance, financial records, transfer logs going back at least 2.5 years. The pause this time was longer. "I'll move some things around. Come in tomorrow morning. I'll be there." He hung up. Hargrove called back 40 minutes later, while Darius was still parked on the same block. He had pulled the preliminary numbers from the account routing information Darius had forwarded from the bank statements. "I want you to prepare yourself," Hargrove said. "I'm prepared." 28 months of transfers, Hargrove said, at $10,000 a month, with 2 months that appear to have been double payments. A pause. "We're looking at $287,000, Darius." The street outside the windshield went very quiet. "You still there?" Hargrove asked. "I'm here. We'll talk tomorrow. There's a lot to work through." "Yeah," Darius said. "There is." He set the phone down on the passenger seat. He did not start the truck. He did not move. He sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes while the dinner crowd moved in and out of provisions, and the street lights came on one by one, and somewhere behind the restaurant's glass windows, Andrea Banks finished her meal and probably smiled. Darius pulled into his mother's driveway at 6:47 in the morning. The sun was barely up. The oak tree in her front yard threw long shadows across the lawn, and the porch light was still on the way it always was. Paulette kept it burning until she knew he was somewhere safe. He sat in the truck for a moment. Then he got out. She opened the front door before he knocked. She took one look at his face and stepped back to let him in. "Sit down," she said. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table he had done homework at, the same table where she had explained to him, when he was 11 years old, how to read a person's eyes before you believed what came out of their mouth. She set a cup of coffee in front of him and sat across from him and folded her hands. "Tell me," she said. He told her everything. He started with the account balance. He walked her through the bank statements, the transfers, the name V. Price. He told her about the building with the valet stand, about Diane and the file, about the medical section with nothing in it. He told her about the restaurant. Victor's chair pulled close, the hand on Andrea's back, the way Andrea had closed her eyes when Victor kissed her palm. Then he told her about the sick brother's story, how Andrea had sat across from him and cried, how he had held her, how she had looked him in the face and described specialist visits and medication costs, and a man named Andre who was too proud to ask for help. Paulette went very still. She had a particular kind of stillness, his mother. Not the stillness of someone who had nothing to say, the stillness of someone deciding whether to say the thing they had been holding for a very long time. "Mama," Darius said. She exhaled slowly through her nose. "2 years into your marriage," she said. "Andrea asked me about your life insurance, whether you had a policy, what the payout looked like." She kept her eyes on the table. She framed it as planning, being a responsible wife. "I told her the general figure and I moved on." She paused. I filed it away. I told myself I was being uncharitable. The kitchen was quiet. "And 3 years ago," Paulette said, "she called me, said she was asking for a friend's family member, someone dealing with a kidney situation. She wanted to know if I knew any good specialists in the area." She finally looked up at him. "I gave her 2 names, Darius. I gave her the names of doctors, and she used them to build out the story she told you. The thing about his mother was that she did not perform guilt. She did not collapse into it or turn it into something he had to manage for her. She just sat with it, square-shouldered and clear-eyed, the way she sat with everything that cost her something. "You didn't know," he said. "No," she said. "But I gave her the bricks." Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then his phone rang. It was Reggie. Darius picked up. "Talk to me," Darius said. "So I went through the business card statements like you asked." Reggie's voice was controlled but tight around the edges, the way it got when he was keeping himself from saying something louder. "There's a supplementary card on the account, added 14 months ago. I don't remember signing off on it. Do you?" "No." "Right, because you didn't. Neither did I." A pause. "The card's been used twice, both times for vehicle rentals." I cross-referenced the dates. Darius already knew what was coming. "And?" "Both rentals line up exactly with weekends she told you she was with Andre." Reggie's voice dropped. "The sick brother story. She used it to cover the money and the time. Both. The same lie doing 2 jobs at once." Darius looked across the table at his mother. Paulette was watching him with the steady, careful attention of a woman reading the weather. "Where were the rentals picked up?" Darius asked. 6 blocks from the Alderton Tower," Reggie said. Darius set his phone flat on the table for a moment. He pressed 2 fingers against his mouth. He breathed. Then he picked it back up. "Don't touch anything else yet. I'm calling Hargrove." "Already figured," Reggie said. "I'm here." He ended the call and stood up. Paulette stood with him. She did not say anything. She just walked him to the door the way she always had, one hand briefly on his arm as he passed. He stepped out onto the porch and dialed Hargrove from the top of the driveway steps. The morning was cool and sharp and smelled like cut grass from somewhere down the block. Hargrove picked up on the second ring. "It's not just the personal account," Darius said. "She put a supplementary card on the business account without authorization. Used it for vehicle rentals. I have the dates, and I have documentation that the dates correspond directly to a fabricated alibi." He paused. "This is fraud against the business, not just against me personally." A beat of silence. Then Hargrove said, "Send me everything Reggie has. Today. It'll be in your inbox inside the hour." He hung up. From the doorway behind him, Paulette stood with one hand on the frame and watched him walk back to his truck. She did not call after him. She did not need to. He could feel her eyes on his back, steady and certain, and already deciding what she would do when Sunday came. Darius pulled into the driveway at 6:12 that evening. He sat in the truck for 30 seconds. Just 30. Then he got out, walked through the front door, and kissed Andrea on the cheek. "Smells good," he said. She was at the stove. Salmon and roasted vegetables, his favorite on weeknights. She looked over her shoulder and smiled, and it was a real smile, warm and easy, the kind she had given him in the early years. "Hard day?" she asked. Long one, he said. How about you? And just like that, they were husband and wife again. Moving around the kitchen the way people do when they have shared a space long enough that their bodies know the choreography. He poured himself a glass of water. She plated the food. They sat across from each other and ate, and she asked about the hospital project, and he told her about a permit delay, and she listened with her chin resting on her hand the way she always did when she wanted to look attentive. He watched all of it. He filed all of it. He said nothing. 3 weeks passed like that. Darius was warm, steady, a degree or two quieter than usual, but not cold. Never cold, because cold would have told her something. Andrea read the quiet as work pressure. He could see her doing it, adjusting her read on him the way she always did, recalibrating to whatever explanation required the least examination. She performed concern beautifully. She left his coffee ready before he woke up. She asked about his sleep. On a Thursday evening, she reached across the couch and rubbed the back of his neck without being asked the way she used to. He let her. Twice she mentioned Andre. The first time was a Sunday morning over breakfast. She said his latest labs had come back and the numbers were encouraging. The specialist, she used a name, specific, confident, was cautiously optimistic. She looked relieved when she said it. Her face did the right things in the right order. Darius looked up from his plate. That's really good to hear, he said. I know that's been weighing on you. It has, she said softly. It really has. The second time was a Wednesday. She brought it up while they were getting ready for bed, in the way people mention things when they think the other person's guard is down. Low light, quiet room, the intimacy of routine. Andre was looking into a less aggressive treatment option, she said. It might mean fewer specialist visits. She said it might actually save them some money going forward. Darius was brushing his teeth. He met his own eyes in the bathroom mirror. Good, he said around the toothbrush. He rinsed and turned off the light. I'm glad he's got options. She was already in bed when he came out. He climbed in beside her and reached over and turned off his lamp. And in the dark, he lay still and let his breathing go slow and even. He did not sleep for a long time. Diane called on a Friday afternoon while Darius was in his truck between job sites. He's escalating, she said. No preamble. That was what he liked about Diane. I caught an exchange in the parking garage of his building Wednesday evening. He wants $5,000 on top of the regular transfer. Framed it as startup capital for a brand consultancy. Darius said nothing. He let her continue. His body language was different. Her voice was careful, precise. He stepped into her space, not aggressive enough to be a scene but deliberate. He pointed at her twice. She looked over her shoulder both times, checking if anyone was around. A pause. She's nervous, Mr. Banks. The way she was watching him. The way she was holding herself. That is not how a woman looks at a man she trusts. That's how a woman looks at a man she's not sure she can manage anymore. Darius watched a flatbed truck roll through the intersection in front of him. Did she agree to the $5,000? He asked. She stalled. Said she needed a few days. Diane paused. He didn't like that. He thanked her and ended the call. He sat with that for a moment. Andrea had started something she thought she was in charge of, and somewhere along the way, the thing had turned around and started running her. He had suspected it. Now, he had a picture of it. It changed nothing about what he was going to do. But it explained the way she had been looking at her phone at dinner lately, screen angled slightly away from him, her jaw tight in a way she didn't know she was doing. It was a Tuesday night when she brought up the Wills. They were finishing a bottle of wine on the couch, a home renovation show on low in the background. Andrea had her legs tucked under her, relaxed, casual, setting a scene without appearing to set one. She rested her hand on his arm. I've been thinking, she said, that we should probably update our estate documents. Wills, beneficiaries, all of it. My attorney handles both individual and joint filing. We could do it together. Make it simple. Her hand was warm on his arm. Her voice was easy. Darius thought about a kitchen table, about his mother folding her hands and saying, "She asked me what the payout looked like." He looked at Andrea and nodded slowly. "That's probably smart," he said. "Let me check my schedule." She smiled and leaned her head back against the cushion, satisfied. He picked up his phone and waited until she was in the other room. Then he called Hargrove. Hargrove's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, all clean lines and muted colors, the kind of place designed to feel like nothing bad could happen inside it. Darius had been here twice before, once to review the bank's electric incorporation documents, once to update his contractor liability coverage. Both times he had left feeling like his business was protected. He set the folder on Hargrove's desk at 8:47 in the morning. Hargrove opened it without ceremony. He was a precise man, mid-50s, silver at his temples, the kind of quiet that came from decades of reading documents other people didn't want to understand. He turned pages slowly. He did not react to the photographs. He did not react to the transfer logs. He made small notations in the margin of his yellow legal pad, and when he reached the last page, he closed the folder and set his pen down. "The business account component changes the exposure significantly," he said. "I know," Darius said. "Personal financial fraud in a divorce proceeding is damaging. Business account fraud is a different category entirely." He folded his hands on top of the folder. "I'm going to bring in a forensic accountant, someone who can document every dollar formally, the kind of documentation that holds up not just in family court, but in a civil proceeding." He paused. "Possibly criminal, depending on how the DA's office reads the business component." Darius nodded. "One more thing," he said. He told Hargrove about the estate conversation. The wine, the couch, Andrea's hand warm on his arm, the easy suggestion that they update their wills together. Hargrove was quiet for a moment. "When was this?" "Tuesday night." Hargrove wrote something on his legal pad and underlined it twice. "All right," he said. "Let me get to work." The forensic accountant's name was Mercer. She had a small office 2 blocks from the courthouse and a reputation, Hargrove said, for finding things people were certain were buried. She spent 4 days with the bank records, the transfer logs, the business card statements, and the rental documentation. When she was done, she produced a report that was 31 pages long and left no space for interpretation. The total was $341,000. Darius read that number at Hargrove's conference table on a Thursday morning. He already knew it was coming. Hargrove had given him a preliminary figure the week before, but seeing it formatted on a page, column by column, date by date, account by account, each transfer cross-referenced against Andrea's fabricated medical timeline, made it different, made it real in a way that the running count in his head never quite had. $341,000, built from his labor, extracted through a story about a dying man. He set the report down. He picked up his coffee. The background search on Andre Watkins came back the same afternoon. Andre Watkins, 34, resident of Atlanta, Georgia. Employed as a logistics coordinator for a regional freight company. Same employer for the past 6 years. No hospitalizations, no specialist treatment history, no record of kidney disease, stage 3 or otherwise. Healthy as far as any database could determine, and completely unaware that his name had been borrowed for 2.5 years to build a story precise enough to make a grown man hold his wife while she cried about him. Andre Watkins had not spoken to his sister in over a year. The reason, according to a mutual family acquaintance Hargrove's investigator reached by phone, was a falling out over money. Darius read that part twice. Then he set the paper face down on the table. Tanya picked up on the second ring. Hargrove had located her through the Atlanta case file, a civil proceeding, settled out of court, sealed but traceable through the right channels. She had transferred $190,000 to Victor Price over 18 months before she finally went to the authorities. The case settled without criminal charges, which meant Victor had walked away from it the same way he walked away from everything. Clean on paper, unchanged underneath. Darius was not on that call. Hargrove handled it, but he received a summary that afternoon, and then, unprompted, a personal call from Tanya herself. Her voice was steady, the voice of a woman who had made peace with something that did not deserve peace. She walked him through Victor's pattern from the beginning. The charm, first. Specific. Attentive. The kind of attention that made a woman feel genuinely chosen. Then, the gradual escalation. Small financial asks that felt like intimacy, like being trusted. Then larger ones, framed as urgency, as emergency, as temporary. And underneath it all, slow and methodical, the shift from warmth to pressure, from seduction to management. He's charming until he doesn't need to be, Tanya said. And once he's got something on you, once you're already in, he uses it. Not loud, just steady, like a hand on your shoulder that's a little too heavy. Darius said, "Did he ever bring up estate documents?" A beat of silence. "He called it financial planning," she said. "Said it was about protecting what we were building together." Her voice didn't waver, but something in it went flat. "I almost did it. I got the forms." Darius thanked her. She said she'd have a written statement to Hargrove by end of week. After he hung up, he sat with the shape of what he now fully understood. Andrea had started this. She had chosen it, constructed it, maintained it. That was real, and it was not going anywhere. But somewhere in the last year, the thing she had built had started building around her. Victor had seen what she was, a woman with access, with a story to protect, with enough to lose that she couldn't easily walk away. And he had started working her the same way she had worked Darius. The charm had already turned. The pressure was already there. The estate conversation on the couch, her hand easy on his arm, had almost certainly been Victor's idea before it became hers. She had come into this willing. She had stayed because she no longer had a clear way out. That changed nothing, but it explained everything. He called Beverly Watkins on a Friday evening. "Beverly," he said, warm and unhurried, "I'm putting together a Sunday dinner. Hospital contract came through bigger than expected, and I want to celebrate properly. Family dinner. You're cooking if you're willing, or I'll handle it. Either way, I want you there." Beverly's voice lit up the way it always did when Darius made her feel included. She said she'd bring her sweet potato casserole. She asked what time. He told her 6 o'clock. He told her not to bring anything, then let her talk him into the casserole because it made her happy to contribute. After the call, he sat at the kitchen table for a long time. He could hear Andrea upstairs, the faint sound of her moving through the bedroom. He could hear the house around him, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the pipes, sounds so familiar they had stopped registering years ago. He registered them now. Sunday morning, he laid his clothes out on the chair in the corner of the bedroom. Not his work clothes, not his church suit. Something in between. Dark slacks, a pressed shirt. A jacket he'd bought 2 years ago for a Contractors Association dinner and worn twice since. Clothes that said he had taken care with this. Clothes that said this was something. He smoothed the jacket once with the flat of his hand. Then he walked downstairs to make coffee, and he let the morning come. Beverly Watkins arrived at 6 o'clock exactly, the way she always did. She was a woman who believed that punctuality was a form of respect, and she extended that respect to everyone she loved. She came through the front door in her good wool coat, deep burgundy, the one she saved for occasions that mattered. And she smelled like the sweet potato casserole she carried in both hands and like the same powder she had worn to every important event of her life. "Something smells wonderful in here," she said, looking around the dining room with the satisfied expression of a woman who approved of what she saw. Darius took the casserole from her and kissed her on the cheek. "Glad you're here, Beverly." He meant it. That was the complicated part. Andrea moved through the kitchen the way she always did when she was performing comfort. Unhurried, deliberate, checking things on the stove with the ease of a woman who had nothing to prove and nothing to hide. She had set the table with the good dishes. She had lit 2 candles. She was wearing a blouse Darius recognized, a deep green one she pulled out for dinners that were supposed to feel like something. She looked, to anyone watching, like a woman who had built a life and was enjoying an evening inside it. Paulette sat at the far end of the table with a glass of water, and her hands folded in her lap. She had arrived early, at Darius's quiet request, and she had said almost nothing since Beverly walked in. She watched. That was all. She watched Andrea move through the kitchen, and she watched Darius carry Beverly's casserole to the counter, and she held her expression with the practiced stillness of a woman who had been holding things inside for a long time and had decided tonight she would simply wait. Dinner was ordinary. That was the thing that would stay with Darius afterward. How ordinary it was. Beverly talked about her church's fall fundraiser. Andrea asked about Paulette's neighbor's hip surgery. Darius said the hospital contract had come in larger than projected, and Beverly clasped her hands together and said she always knew he would do something great. Just always knew. And Andrea smiled at that and rested her hand briefly on Darius's arm. He let her. He passed the rolls. He poured the water. He asked Beverly about the casserole recipe, which he had asked about before, and she told him again with the pleasure of someone who never tires of being asked. When the plates were cleared, Paulette stood without being asked and began moving them to the kitchen. Beverly offered to help. Paulette told her to sit, her voice pleasant and leaving no room for argument. The table was empty when Darius reached under his chair. He set 3 folders down, plain manila, no label. He placed them in the center of the table with the same steadiness he brought to everything. No drama in the gesture, no announcement. He simply set them down, and then he sat back in his chair and looked at his wife. Andrea's eyes moved to the folders. Something shifted in her face. Not panic, not yet, but a recognition, a calculation beginning. "I'd like to walk through some things," Darius said. His voice was quiet, completely level. "I'm going to ask everyone to let me finish before anyone speaks." He opened the first folder. He did not rush. He laid the transfer logs out first. 31 months of $10,000 withdrawals, each one dated, each one traced to the same account. V. Price. He said the name clearly. He said it without inflection. He let Beverly look at the numbers for a moment before he continued. Then, the photographs. He placed them face up, one at a time. The restaurant. Victor's chair pulled to Andrea's side of the table. His hand settled on the small of her back with the ease of a man who had done it 1,000 times. Andrea's fingers at his jaw, his mouth against her palm. Her eyes closed. Beverly made a small sound. She did not speak. Darius moved to the second folder. The forensic report. Mercer's 31 pages, reduced here to a single summary page. He read the total aloud because he wanted it in the room as sound, not just text. $341,000. He said it the way you say a fact. No performance, just the number and what it meant. Business credit card statements next. The rental records. The dates cross-referenced against the weekends Andrea had described to him in careful, grieving detail. The difficult treatment cycles. The long drives to sit with her brother. The nights she said she came home tired from watching someone she loved suffer. Each date matched a rental. Each rental picked up 6 blocks from Victor Price's apartment. He set down Tanya's written statement without reading from it. He just placed it on the table and said, "This woman's name is Tanya. She lost $190,000 to Victor Price in Atlanta. This is her account of how it happened, and what he asked her to do with her estate documents. He watched Andrea's jaw tighten. The last page was the background report on Andre Watkins. He slid it across the table toward Beverly specifically. He gave her a moment to see the name, the city, the employer, the clean medical history. "Your grandson," Darius said quietly. "Andrea's brother. He's 34 years old. He lives in Atlanta. He's healthy. He has never had kidney disease." He paused. "He hasn't spoken to Andrea in over a year. Apparently, there was a disagreement. About money." Beverly looked at the page in front of her. She looked at it for a long time. "I asked you here," Darius said, turning to face her fully, "because you have a right to know what happened in this house. Andrea has been carrying your family's name in every room she walked into for 8 years. You built something into her that she used as cover." His voice did not harden. It stayed exactly where it had started, quiet and clear. "That wasn't fair to you. You deserved to know." Andrea moved then. She pulled her eyes from the folders and straightened in her chair and said, "Darius, this is not the whole story. You know our marriage hasn't been right for a long time. You know I've felt invisible in this house. You know?" "I know all of that," Darius said. He said it without cutting her off. He let her hear that he wasn't dismissing her. "None of it," he said, "explains a dying man who doesn't exist." The table was very quiet. Andrea's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "None of it explains Tanya," he said. "None of it explains the rental cars. None of it explains the estate attorney conversation on a Tuesday night with your hand on my arm." He did not raise his voice. He had not raised it once. He simply set each sentence down the way he had set down the folders, with the weight of something carefully carried and finally, deliberately, placed. Beverly Watkins looked at her daughter. It was not a quick look. It was the look of a woman moving through something, sorting through years of pride and memory, and Sunday dinners and phone calls, and the particular hope a mother builds around a child she believes in. Working through all of it, right there at the table, with her hands flat on the tablecloth and her good coat hung on the chair behind her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Andrea." A pause, long enough to fill the room. "What did you do?" Not a question. There was no rise at the end, no searching inflection. It landed like a door closing. Andrea said, "Mama." Beverly pushed her chair back from the table. She stood without hurry and reached behind her for her coat. She put it on, one arm and then the other, and smoothed the front of it with both hands. She picked up her purse from the floor beside her chair. Darius stood. "Beverly, do you need—" "I'm fine." She touched his arm once, briefly. "Thank you for dinner." She walked to the front door. She did not look back toward the dining room. She did not call out. She did not say goodnight to her daughter. The door opened. The door closed. The sound it made was small and clean and final. Not a slam, not a storm. Just a quiet click, the latch catching, the kind of sound a door makes when someone on the other side of it has made up their mind. The process server arrived at 7:43 on a Monday morning. Andrea answered the door in her robe, coffee in hand, still believing, the way people believe things right up until the moment they can't anymore, that she had time, that there was still space to manage this, to talk to Darius, to find the right words, to locate some version of the story that let her walk out of this with something intact. The man on the porch handed her a brown envelope and said her name to confirm it. She stood there holding it for a long moment after he walked away. The coffee steamed in her other hand. The neighborhood was quiet. Somebody's sprinklers ran across the street, ticking through their cycle, completely indifferent. She opened the envelope. Hargrove had filed before 8. The divorce petition came first. Concurrent with it, which was the part Andrea's eyes snagged on, which was the part she read 3 times, a civil suit, $341,000. The filing named her specifically and cited documented financial fraud across joint personal accounts and business accounts. The language was precise, clinical, the kind of language that had been written by someone with 31 pages of forensic accounting behind it, and no reason to soften anything. She called an attorney by 9. She got a referral from a friend, someone who handled family law, good reputation, downtown office. She was sitting across from him by 11. He read through the filing quietly. He turned pages without comment for a long time. Then he set it down and looked at her over the top of it and said, "Mrs. Banks, I have to ask you something directly. Is there anything in here that isn't accurate?" Andrea started to answer. He waited. She said the documentation was being framed in a way that didn't reflect the full context of the marriage. He nodded slowly. He said, "I understand, but I want you to hear me clearly. Whoever built this file was thorough. The business fraud component alone—" He stopped. Started again. "This has the potential to move beyond civil exposure. Do you understand what I mean by that?" She understood. She left his office with a retainer agreement and the particular stillness of someone who has just been told, by a professional whose job it is to help her, that the ground she's standing on is not as solid as she thought. The call from her employer came on Wednesday. Her firm's director of operations, a careful man who chose his words like he was billing by the syllable, informed Andrea that an internal review had been initiated regarding 2 charges flagged on a corporate account. The charges had been traced to a supplementary card. They corresponded to specific dates. He said the review was standard procedure, and that in the meantime she would be placed on administrative leave effective immediately, with pay pending the outcome. With pay. As if that softened it. She sat in her car in the parking garage for 20 minutes after the call ended. She thought about the client list she'd spent 6 years building, the director title she'd lobbied for, the business cards with the embossed logo she'd been quietly proud of every time she handed one over. She had used the corporate account twice, both times to cover logistics she didn't want traced back to a personal card, both times connected to Victor. She had been careful about so many things for so long. She had not been careful about that. Victor was served on a Thursday afternoon. The consumer fraud attorney who received Hargrove's package, Tanya's statement, the full surveillance file, the documented financial pattern across multiple women, had been building toward something for 18 months. The bank's documentation was the piece that completed it. A demonstrable pattern, multiple victims, a consistent method, dates, dollar amounts, names. Victor's attorney reviewed the file and told him plainly that the pattern evidence was serious, that trial would be damaging in ways that settlement might limit, that his best option was to resolve this quietly and quickly. Victor had no quiet and quick option available to him. He had no liquid assets. He had never kept what other people gave him. He had spent it, worn it, lived inside it, and called it his. The money Andrea transferred every month had paid for the apartment, the car, the wardrobe, the rooftop dinners. None of it had become anything. None of it had built toward anything. It had just passed through him and disappeared. When Andrea's transfers stopped, which they did immediately, the accounts frozen as part of the civil proceedings, Victor Price was left holding a lease he couldn't cover and a lifestyle that evaporated inside of a week. His landlord initiated eviction proceedings on the 43rd day. On the 58th day, the luxury apartment with the valet stand and the rooftop terrace was no longer his. The unit was cleaned and relisted within the week. Reggie called on a Friday afternoon, while Darius was at the job site reviewing conduit runs for the hospital's East Wing. "Diane confirmed it," Reggie said. "He's out, as of Tuesday." Darius stepped away from the noise of the site. He stood near the truck, hand braced on the hood, looking at nothing in particular. He was quiet for a moment. "Good," he said. Andrea was gone by day 28. She left on a Tuesday, which felt accidental until Darius realized nothing Andrea did was accidental. She had timed it the way she timed everything, before the last possible moment, with just enough control remaining to make it look like a choice instead of a removal. The movers came in the morning. They took her clothes, her vanity, the artwork she had picked out for the living room, the color-coordinated kitchen things she had replaced his original ones with 3 years into the marriage. They did not take the furniture, because the furniture was his. They did not take the house, because the house was his. They took what fit in a truck and drove it to Beverly Watkins's address, the house Andrea had grown up in, the house she had spent her adult life making sure she had surpassed. She was sleeping in the guest room with the floral comforter now. Darius knew this because Paulette knew it, and Paulette knew everything that moved through that community eventually. He did not take satisfaction in picturing it exactly, but he did not look away from it either. That first night, he walked through the house alone, not searching for anything, not checking on anything, just moving through it the way you move through something that belongs to you, room by room, unhurried, present. He turned the lights on in the front hallway, turned them off, moved to the living room, the dining room, the kitchen where he had sat across from Andrea at dinner every night for weeks, with the full file already built, and said nothing. He turned each light on, stood for a moment in what it illuminated, turned it off and moved to the next room. His wiring, his fixtures, his house, every circuit traced back to him. He stood in the bedroom for a long time in the dark. He did not think about Andrea specifically. He thought about the version of himself who had held her in this room while she cried about a man who did not exist, and had felt, in that moment, like someone a person could count on. He gave that version of himself some room to be human about it. Then he turned the bedroom light on, left it on, and went to the kitchen to unlock the back door for Reggie. Reggie showed up with a cooler and 2 containers of food from the place on Clemson Avenue they'd been going to since they were 22. They sat on the porch. The neighborhood was warm and quiet. Somebody had their television on across the street, the blue light moving in the window. They ate without saying much. Reggie didn't try to fill the silence, which was one of the things Darius had always valued in him. The man knew the difference between quiet that needed company and quiet that needed to be left alone. This was the first kind. After a while, Reggie said, "You eat something today before this?" "Lunch," Darius said. "That's not an answer." "Half a lunch." Reggie handed him more food without comment. They sat until the street got fully dark. Then Reggie packed up the cooler, clapped Darius once on the shoulder, firm, brief, the handshake of a man who meant it, and left. Andrea's civil case settled 4 months later. Her attorney negotiated the figure down from $341,000, but not by much. She paid. It came out of the equity she'd built in accounts Hargrove had identified, and it left her considerably thinner than she had arranged her life to be. The settlement was documented. The record existed. It did not go away because she paid it. It simply became a record of someone who had been required to. Her employer's internal review concluded 2 weeks after the settlement. The director of operations called her. The call lasted 6 minutes. The title she had lobbied for, the client list she'd spent 6 years building, the business cards with the embossed logo, gone. She consulted independently after that. Smaller clients. Reduced reach. She was competent enough to survive it, which was its own particular kind of consequence. Not collapse, just a permanent step backward from the version of herself she had been constructing. Victor Price's civil judgment was entered in the 5th month. He could not pay it. The judgment attached to his name in the public record the way these things do. Permanently, searchable, available to anyone who looked. He moved cities twice in the following year. Tanya's attorney monitored the activity. Victor had refined the method over 2 decades, and the method was still running, just in a smaller radius now, with the weight of a documented legal record following every step. Darius heard about the second city from Tanya herself. She had written him a letter, personal, not legal, handwritten on plain paper. She thanked him for building the file correctly. She said she had spent years feeling like she had no recourse, like what Victor did existed in a space that the law couldn't quite reach, and that having a record, an actual, formal, documented record, meant something she didn't have a precise word for, but that felt like the return of something she hadn't realized she'd lost. She said she hoped he found his footing faster than she found hers. He read the letter twice at the kitchen table. Then he got out a piece of paper and wrote back. 18 months after the divorce filing, Banks Electric finished the hospital contract. It had been the biggest project the company had ever taken on when they started it, and by the time the final inspection passed, it was the kind of completed work that built a reputation in ways that a good bid alone never could. The project manager had already referred 2 commercial contacts without being asked. The firm's name was circulating in rooms where Darius hadn't been before. He brought on 2 additional electricians, 8 employees total now. 8 people whose paychecks had his signature on them, whose work trucks had his company name on the side, who called him by his first name and showed up on time because the place he'd built was worth showing up for. He bought the company truck outright in October, walked into the dealership, sat down, wrote a check. The salesman had started to explain financing options, and Darius had set the checkbook on the desk, and the man had stopped explaining. His name was on the door in clean block letters, Banks Electric, the same 2 words he'd started with 15 years ago, in a one-man operation out of a second-hand van. Still the same 2 words. Everything else had changed. He was in final negotiations with the city on a municipal infrastructure contract, the kind of contract that, if it landed, would require him to expand again, to think about the company not just as what it was, but as what it was becoming. His attorney had reviewed the preliminary terms. Hargrove had said, with his usual economy of expression, that the terms were favorable. Darius had nodded and said he'd sleep on it. He had not slept on it. He had already decided. He just liked to take a night before he signed anything significant. His version of a ritual. Saturday morning. Coffee on the porch. The oak in the front yard was doing something with the early light, catching it at an angle that moved the shadows slow and easy across the porch boards. The neighborhood was just starting up. Someone was mowing 2 houses down, the engine rising and falling as they turned. A kid on a bicycle rolled past without looking up. His phone buzzed on the armrest. Paulette. He picked up. "Morning, Mama. Tell me about this city contract," she said, which meant she already knew about it and had called to hear him say it out loud. He told her. The scope, the timeline, the expansion it would require. He told her about the 2 new hires, about the hospital referrals, about the truck. When he finished, Paulette made a sound that was part laugh and part something older, something that had been waiting a long time to be released. The sound of a woman who had raised someone through hard years and difficult choices, and was now on the other end of that, listening to the proof that it had been worth it. "Mama, I'm good," he said. A brief pause. "Warm. Certain." "I know, baby," she said. "I knew you would be." He hung up, set the phone back on the armrest, picked up his coffee. The light moved through the oak the way light moves when it has nowhere to be and nothing to prove. The shadows shifted slow across the porch. The kid on the bicycle had looped back around and was coming past again, standing up on the pedals this time, working at it. Darius watched him go. He had built this house once. Now he was living in it. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.